Is the main protagonist of Fallout 4 a synth? I told myself when I came back to ShoddyCast that I wasn't going to do a bunch of Fallout content, but when I worked on my latest science episode over at Game Theory, I just wanted to get footage of the game. That was all I intended to do, but now look at me! Tens of hours later, decorating my house. What is wrong with me? But playing it again and finally getting around to playing Far Harbor over 2 years after it came out reinvigorated thoughts that I had, predictions that I had about the game long before it came out, that the main character was a synth created by the Institute. Of course, if you play through the main game, this never becomes a thread or a plot point at all that sees any fruition. It's not hinted at in any major way, and the only synths you meet are other people. Your child, Sean, Dance, dozens of others, but let's back up for a second before I get to the main thrust and establish a few things first. What is a synth? Synths have their origins in Fallout as far back as 2008 in Fallout 3, where you can do a quest in Rivet City to discover the identity of a rogue synth from the Institute, who turns out to be the head of security Harkness, or synth designation A321. It's established that synths, or androids as they were called in that game, are synthetic humans created to be near-perfect iterations of our species in every conceivable way. Different from clones in the sense that they aren't grown in a womb, but rather constructed out of raw materials. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, potassium, iron, nitrogen, and water all combined in the perfect orientations and amounts to create something that breathes like a human, walks like a human, and most importantly is capable of complex thoughts like a human, with some slight modifications. Specifically ports and implants that allow for programming, memory wipes, kill phrases, and tracking. All these things are integral because they allow a measure of control when these machines, and what is an organism if not a complex machine, invariably malfunction or develop free will, however you want to frame it. There are 2 generations of synths prior to these, with the current human-like synths being Generation 3s. Generation 2s are more simplistic, and Generation 1s even more so. There are a few key differences between humans and synths, mainly in that memories, experience, and secret deep programmed directives can be implanted into their brains, but one interesting tidbit is that they don't gain any weight no matter how much they eat. They still bleed, are susceptible to harmful damage that radiation can cause to their cells, and are treatable with medicine. I think that's about everything we need so far, but why do I say that the main character is a synth? Before I answer that, I have to lay out there that this isn't some kooky conspiracy theory of mine. This isn't like the indoctrination theory of Mass Effect. The difference between a conspiracy theory and analysis is evidence. And there is a lot of evidence that the main character of Fallout 4, you, the player, the person building settlements, is in fact not a naturally born human, but is in fact a synth created by the Institute to act as an agent of their will. But why? Well, we'll get to the why later, but first we need to get to the how. The how is actually pretty easy, honestly, and once you compile all the evidence, it almost seems impossible that you could arrive at any other conclusion than you're a synth. Let's start with the most basic. Memories. It's established early in the game, in particular the opening voiceover, that the male sole survivor is a war veteran, presumably in the war to liberate Anchorage, Alaska, who's offered access to the Vault program as a perk of his service to the United States military. The female sole survivor is his wife and a lawyer, and they both have a son together. This son is Sean, who we later learn is the leader of the Institute 200 years later, having been raised there after he was stolen in 2227 and one of his parents killed. The other survived and became the sole survivor and was refrozen, or so we think. It's true that Sean had 2 parents who lived before the bombs dropped. It's true that one was a soldier in the United States military. It's true that they were frozen in Vault 111, and it's true that they were unfrozen in 2227 so that Sean could be stolen by Conrad Kellogg. It is true that one parent was shot and one was not. What is not true is that the sole survivor of this moment survived to be freed 60 years later, tracked down Kellogg, killed him, and did all the things we know this person to have done throughout the game in Fallout 4. This person, man, woman, railroad, Institute, Brotherhood of Steel, drug addict, raider warlord, doesn't matter, is a synth. How do we know this? Let's start with the basics. Sean's parents are dead. I don't mean this in a philosophical from a certain point of view, Obi-Wan Kenobi nonsense. I mean literally absolutely dead. One of them, well, we know how it happened, was shot in the chest with a 44, but what about the quote-unquote survivor? How do we know they're dead? Well, terminal entries in Vault 111. The terminal entries in the vault tell us that the life support failed for the cryogenic subjects, and therefore the programs were terminated early and all the occupants died. All of them. This wasn't individual tank failures, this was a system-wide failure that impacted every single containment unit. And when did this failure happen? 22/27, when Sean was excised from the cryogenic chambers. This override process conducted by the Institute triggered an avalanche of bugs in the vault's management systems and subsequently killed everybody who wasn't pulled out of their tanks. They froze to death. And yeah, we hear Kellogg calling the surviving parent the backup, but he's not a scientist. He's just a thug with a gun, and it's possible that even the local scientists didn't know this would be a fatal event. They were there for one sample. That's it. Those moments, those last moments when your character is getting frozen yet again, you're not fading into unconsciousness. You're fading into your death. Kinda. We'll get to that in a second. I can tell that you have one issue with this thread, and that's, isn't it possible that one unit was preserved? Maybe. It is technically possible that a massive system-wide failure in the life support systems killed literally everyone except for you because you were protected by plot powers? Yeah, that's technically possible, but it's not probable. And once you let me get through all of my evidence, I think you'll agree that there are other things, other threads, trails of breadcrumbs that establish that something else is far, far more likely. Let's move on to Far Harbor, where Dima, the prototype Generation 2.5 synth, asks you questions directly about your synth status. And while you can personally answer however you want, it establishes two things. One from an in-game mechanic standpoint, and another from a plot perspective. One, if you answer that you are a synth, the option isn't bracketed with a lie clarifier, something you see all over the place when you play Fallout 4 and say something that isn't true. Meaning, if you select this answer, your character is admitting to being a synth earnestly. And then, when Dima questions your memory, it's established that the intro sequence for the game are the only memories this character has. War, marriage, grad school, having a baby, they're not there. What you, the player, experiences is the totality of the sole survivor's consciousness. From character creation to bomb dropping, these are the earliest memories this character has. This is key because these gaps in memory, where the only memories in existence serve merely as a motivational mandate, are key qualities of sentient synths, and is an important part of unraveling or not whether a person is a synth, because the only other way to know is an autopsy, which is reinforced not only by Dima, but several other characters. There are no known ways to safely test to see if someone is a synth. Then there's your capabilities themselves. While the sole survivor was either a soldier or a lawyer, according to their memories, they are capable of so much more. Leading entire settlements, hacking any computer they come across, running for miles without tiring, showing mastery over any weapon they get their hands on with very little prep work, are capable of killing Kellogg and a freaking Institute courser within, what, a few weeks tops from leaving Vault 111 after supposedly being frozen for 210 years? This is something the acting head of the Synth Retention Bureau specifically asks you about, because Institute coursers are no joke, and you turn every one you fight into paste. The entire quest that's a lead up to fighting the courser does nothing but establish this, as he rips through literal armies of enemies like they're nothing. And this isn't just like storytelling either. I pitted a courser versus just about every enemy in the game, and the only one that was actually a challenge to the courser was a mythic level Deathclaw, and even then it was super close. These dudes are tough, and you, just supposedly some person, can dispatch one? Or maybe you are capable of this because you yourself possess the abilities of a high-grade military synth that surpasses even the Institute coursers. I mean, you can advance so far in your programming that you become effectively immune to radiation, you can use drugs without getting addicted to them at all, making them basically an overclock for your hardware, and just like upgrade your toughness so bullets hurt you less? Does that sound like the way being human works in your experience? All of this is possible in days, weeks, months, tops. In months, you can become the most powerful person on the planet, which leads us to the why. Why would the Institute do this? Well, I think a better question is, why would Sean do this? Because it was Sean, entirely Sean. Sean is honestly the secret main character of Fallout 4. I mean, you don't play as him, but everything centers around him. You're released from the vault, and your subsequent quest is to find him, but you gotta make some stops along the way. In fact, Sean himself alludes to the why of this a little bit himself, or at least part of it. Revenge. Sean doesn't mind that he was taken from Vault 111. He hates the wasteland and he considers himself eternally lucky that he wasn't raised in such a hellscape. But it's not the case that he's happy about how it was done. Sean resents Kellogg's brutality, the brutality that cost him not just one parent in cold-blooded murder, but another in a technical mishap. Sean's parents were murdered so that he could live and become a model for the third generation of synths, and he never got over it. He explicitly says that he timed events and the release of the sole survivor so they'd cross paths with Kellogg and put him in the ground. Kellogg knew this, knew he was bait. He was actually pretty smart after all. And to a certain extent, this also clarifies why Fallout kind of forces combat on you. You don't actually have a choice. You have to fight because that is your prime directive. Even Kellogg himself says, we all know how this is gonna end. You have no choice in the matter. But it goes deeper than that. This is a grand experiment because, as Sean himself says, he was curious to see how far you'd get once released. He is a scientist, and the first thing he does when you show up is show you a child synth modeled directly off of him, which is another clue. The Institute is capable of making, effectively, synth clones. And in order to understand the rest of the why, we have to touch a couple of the largest influences in Fallout 4, iRobot and Blade Runner. Or if you want to be a loser book reader, do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. Blade Runner, obviously, is about a Blade Runner tasked with tracking down rogue replicants, basically synths. Dope movie, cool book, and in the end it's implied or outright stated, depending upon the versions and the mediums, that the protagonist is so good at this because he himself is a replicant without knowing it. iRobot, on the other hand, is an exploration of how even rules that we think are flawless in protecting our own interests can be bent logically, and the final story itself surrounds an amazing politician who surfaces on Earth and starts instituting sweeping social change. It's theorized that this is an elaborate robot that looks like a human who is taking the first law of robotics to its natural conclusion, to protect humans from themselves by taking over the government. And it's this that is the most revealing of Sean's true motivations, the preservation of humanity. Sean is dying, and without a replacement for the Institute's director with a solid vision, it's likely that the entire organization would tear itself apart due to infighting, and the entire wasteland in America would crumble. And that is why he created the perfect replacement, his own mother or father. We already know they can make perfect copies of humans if they want, and this is Sean's ultimate solution. All the trials and tribulations you experience in the game are tests, including meeting your son as an old man. You pass every test should you side with the Institute, and Sean dies safe in the knowledge that the future of humanity is secure. And why wouldn't he do this? This is the most natural choice to him. The Institute regularly replaces important leaders in the wasteland with synths in order to control the populace. Even Dima does this in Far Harbor. This is a regular thing, with many test cases to work the bugs out over time. Of course you can go off the rails, you can join the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel, groups that are diametrically opposed to the Institute's philosophies and goals, and this of course reveals the fatal flaw in Sean's plan. You are not on a tether. You see, he gave you just enough memories to serve as a motivator, link you emotionally to your son and wife, show the face of their murderer, and all of that serves as an emotional through line to push you forward. In fact, you can see even more evidence that this is an implant if you go into free cam mode and leave your containment unit. You can see that you are in the same background area as you are when you are inside of Kellogg's head. This is a complicated neurological implant that you're experiencing, and just outside your field of view, you can see that the seams are falling apart. But in Sean's hubris, he obviously did not give you a kill switch because that would potentially put your reign at risk if his co-workers ever discovered the truth of what he had done in secret. But in the end, even if you kill Sean and the Institute, the experiment, it's a success. The ambition and drive that he infused into you as a synthetic recreation of his mother or father works, just not always as he intended, just like in iRobot. You can lead armies as a raider and secure a military state across the Commonwealth. You can lead the Railroad to, ironically, commit genocide against your entire race by ending their ability to replicate, same with the Brotherhood, but all of these endings secure a future for the Commonwealth with you at the head. No matter what actions you choose, you fulfilled your prime directive. objective. Create the best future for the Commonwealth that you can. Is it your fault that Sean was too proud to foresee his own possible future? No! And maybe he did. Maybe the stakes were high enough that it was worth the risk. We'll never know. Because, he's dead now. Just like both of his parents. Because you, the main character, are a synth. Not a Generation 3 synth with tethers and a kill switch. A Generation 4 synth. A hope for all of humanity in the Commonwealth. Mankind redefined. And what do you think? Do you agree with my analysis? Let me know. I'm not just joshing you. This is something I actually always thought for most of my playthroughs. I left it alone for a long time, but I couldn't help myself. If you like the videos by me and the stuff that I make, consider hopping over to the ShoddyCast Patreon page. These videos take a lot of work, and because I publish huge videos on game theory that take weeks of research and editing time, I don't have a lot of time myself to actually sit and make videos by hand here. So I pay people to help me out. These videos, because I like them to be awesome, take a lot of effort, and every dollar you contribute helps me make awesome stuff for you. Right now, we're slightly under what I need to make 2 videos a month, but I'm gonna try to do it anyway because I love you that much and I love making videos that much. Links in the description, and hey, if you pledge $3, you get access to our patrons-only Discord channel, where it's basically just me and a few dudes talking about Fallout. So that's patreon.com/ShoddyCast. Have a good one.